Welcome back to Digging Deep, the podcast where we offer bereavement bites for time-pressed professionals and where we explore the trends, challenges, and stories that are shaping the future of the death care profession in Canada. I'm your host, Heather Kiteley, President and CEO of GFD and second-generation funeral director. Today, we're recording live from the British Columbia Funeral Association AGM and conference in Vancouver, British Columbia. This is an incredible gathering of professionals dedicated to advancing the way that we support and serve families through loss. In this episode, we are digging into a topic that is reshaping how families think about legacy, sustainability, and their final resting place. We'll explore the growing interest in eco-friendly burial practices, what makes a green burial truly sustainable, and how death care professionals can respond to the rising demand for natural alternatives while maintaining reverence and care. Now, before we jump in, if you're enjoying the Digging Deep podcast, make sure to follow, leave us a comment, and share this episode with someone in your life who might find it valuable. Your support helps us to keep bringing these important conversations to the forefront. Joining me today is Lorraine Fracy. Hey, Lorraine.
Hey, Heather.
Lorraine has accomplished a career in retail services management, and then in 1996, she began working in death care and funeral service. Lorraine joined the Royal Oak Burial Park Service team in 2001 and was appointed to her current position as Manager of Client Services and Administrative Operations in 2013. She is also a British Columbia Funeral Association past president. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you here. I've heard amazing things about you and the work that you've done, not just in your work in the community, but also your work with the association. So I'm excited to get to know you a little bit more today.
And I'm excited too, because not everybody wants to talk about death.
Yeah,
right?
Well, this is the place. This is where we do that, right? Which is why I love doing this, because I could talk about funeral service, death care all day long, and I have such a love for the people that do that work. And so I feel like awesome. We're kindred spirits that way. So we should have some fun today.
For sure.
Okay, so we're going to kick off with some of our research. So we have discovered through our research across Canada that there's a lack of awareness about non-traditional burials and non-traditional methods of disposition and also green options. Only a quarter or less of Canadians have knowledge about new and innovative approaches to green burials. I find that so surprising. And Brad and I were talking a little bit about this when we spoke about how we're all in it, right? And so we think, of course, that everybody knows everything that we do, but what we're discovering is that most people have no idea. So talk to me a little bit about what inspired Royal Oak Burial Park to introduce green burial options, and what has the response been like?
Well, thank you. 16 years we've been at it. We just had we're actually now into our 17th year of green
burial. So you
burial.
were really at the forefront then?
Yes, we were the first in Canada. We were the first in Canada. And to be honest, it really wasn't even on our radar. My boss at the time, Stephen Olson, did a noon radio show with CBC.
Okay.
And the phone, I didn't even know what the topic was, but he was one of the guest speakers. And afterwards, our phone at work just started ringing off the hook. So I was shocked, like, who even listens to the radio?
Yeah, I know, right?
at noon about death
Who's
and dying.
Who's even listening to anything, right?
Right. And I guess it was a caller that had initiated a conversation about green burial and why wasn't there more green options and why.
So he didn't go to talk just about that.
No, it was really just just the cemetery point of view of actually cremation, because cremation we were the highest rate in Canada. Okay. And so a couple of the callers brought up this, the green burial. So much so that we started to inquire with the callers afterwards over a period of about 3 weeks. What's so inspiring, or what's motivating them to want green burial? And the answer was very similar from everybody, that there seems to be two options: cremation, or this fancy limousines and funeral coaches and embalming and and no middle ground. And for them, that seemed to be the middle ground. So long story short, within 18 months, we opened up our first green burial.
Wow.
And as a longtime cemeterian, I had to wrap my head around it, because when you work in a cemetery, you know that people are very territorial. Their spot where their human is, or even their spot that they bought for their future, the grass isn't perfect, or, things have to be just so. And I experienced that when my father died, going and selecting a plot for him. My staff referred to me as the crazy cemetery lady, because all of a sudden I was so picky.
Yeah.
So how was I going to get people to embrace an environment without being territorial? Because our plan for the green burial was Mother Nature would do its thing after we.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because there's probably a lot of our listeners who are within the sector and maybe even have a great idea of what that means. But there's probably could be a lot of listeners who have no idea what green burial means. And I know it means different things in different places. So what did it actually, let's talk detail here. What did it look like? How is it different?
So for us, very West Coast is what people say to us.
Okay.
Earthy, no interference with the body in a sense of chemicals or embalming.
So there's no embalming permitted?
No embalming permitted. Natural fibered, both clothing and disposition containers, like caskets.
So you do allow for caskets?
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as no glues, no metals. So there's a few companies that have come up with wicker, the unfinished pine. So very natural and back to the earth.
Because I know some places will allow for just burial in a shroud.
Correct.
Do you allow for that too, or no?
We do, absolutely. And that was probably one of the big learning curves for me, because, and even for my staff, when we had the first request for a shroud, it was a 6-year-old. And the mom and dad were organic farmers in Kelowna, and they were just so impassioned with our philosophy that they actually brought her to us, which is a fairly, it's an entire day travel.
Wow.
But for them, it filled in with the philosophy of how they lived their life, right? Very natural, and they were willing to surrender her onto our land and tuck her in. And it was one of the most beautiful things. But
that is so beautiful what you have just said. I haven't heard it said that way before. That idea of tucking her in.
Yeah, it's the language that we use at the cemetery. And people like yourself, like you've got a little glow on right now. I remember Sophie Louis from Global, we were getting ready to do an interview, and that caught her attention. And it was mentioned several times. And again, I think that's reflective of the culture of death.
And this is what I mean. So I want to speak to our listeners for a moment, because if anyone has been listening to this podcast for a while, they've often heard me talk about how wonderful people are in death care, right? And this is just some beautiful example of that, right? Yes. I think sometimes the public might think that, it is business, right? And that death care professionals are robots who are, working on the pieces that need to get done and the logistics. And when you talk to people like you and other folks that are in the sector, it is so the opposite of that. Right?
Absolutely. And even within our cemetery, it's legacy, right? I've had the pleasure I just started my 25th year of having families that I see every month for 20 years that, still remember the kindness or the due care and attention that all our staff put in. And when Lola, our little 6-year-old, was tucked in, her family were just so grateful. But my staff were taken aback. My big burly.
Because
all of a sudden there was no outer container. This sweet little.
So you're very close.
Very
you're
raw.
Just that intimate. That would increase the intimacy of that, because you can see because at the cemetery you don't, especially for cemetery staff, I don't think I thought about this before, but you're kind of making me think about this, that there is a bit of detachment from, in the funeral side, there's obviously interaction with the body and care for the body. On the cemetery side, it's usually fairly,
Yeah.
It's not usually, you don't usually have exposure. So
Yeah.
that must have been
It was
such
raw.
an experience for them.
Raw. And my big burly Bruce was like, I can't do this. I don't know how I'm to do this. And so.
And what did he have to do?
Well, he had to lower this little girl into the ground. And so.
And how do you do that?
Well,
when you have like.
It was it was like crash test dummy, because there was no standard operating procedure. This was your first one. Right? This was our first one, and there was nobody to reach out to. So it was sort of on the go. And when Lola came to us, and we knew it was going to be a shroud, my fellas put out a little board. And when we looked at it afterwards, what the mom and dad had done is they covered it in flower petals and soil. And we were like, wait a minute, why didn't we do that? So all of a sudden it evolved that now we were putting cedar boughs down, so that when people put their loved one onto this board, it became so evident of the earth and back to the earth.
And so that board would be, maybe this is more detail than our listeners care to know for, but I am curious because I haven't seen a burial with a shroud before.
Yes.
Other than on 6 Feet Under, which was hopefully not how it normally goes, although that was a funny episode. How does the body arrive to the cemetery? Walk us through that process of the body arrives at the cemetery. How do you get from the logistics of getting from the vehicle to and into the ground?
Well, it was a learning curve for the funeral homes as well, because all of a sudden they were being posed with, well, my family wants a shroud and no outer container. And again, because it was so raw, we were like, how do we do this? So then we had to take ourselves into the practical side. Yeah. How do we move this body dignified and respectful? And we all know the behind the scenes of things that happen.
And the things that can go wrong. I mean, a casket provides you with a fair amount of security that you're going to be able to get from point A to point B without anything terrible happening. Right?
Absolutely. So we had to have plan A, plan B, and plan C. And one of the funeral homes that really embraced the shroud, they actually came up with a clamshell, which is what they use in search and rescue when they're hiking out back. Okay. Right? So they were able to move the body respectfully when somebody didn't want to have an outer container.
So this is like a collaboration and an innovation that's happening between funeral and cemetery. That's beautiful.
And we learned from everyone. Yeah. Every single burial that we did, it was a new adventure. And I'm so honored to sit here today and say, after 16 years, we've got it going on.
That's amazing.
We've done over 600. And for the first time in my career, I was having 20 and 30 and 40-year-olds phoning, wanting to give me their credit card over the phone because they had heard about it and it was something that they wanted. So then we had to mentor cemeteries all over Canada because they were flying them in from Ontario and Alberta. Wow. Doesn't sound very green.
It doesn't sound very, well, that's the irony of green, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, so many people think cremation is green.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it was about embracing that philosophy and then making it fit to how the consumer saw it. It was so consumer driven. The funeral homes, some of them in the very beginning saw it maybe as a negative against their philosophies and the things that they had, the things that they work on and traditional burials. And but it gave us an opportunity to see that people that picked cremation were changing to burial because all of a sudden it fit within their wants and needs and desires, right? And it goes back to that, I make a joke that my ex-husband, I couldn't even say I was dead tired, but oh my God, she said the dead word. Because we don't want to talk about it, right? And people say, why don't we know more about green burial? Well, every time I go on the news or we're doing a story about it, you guys are flipping to something funny or something different. Yeah,
and it's unfair because we know through our research that Canadians want this information, right? And that they don't know how to get it.
Absolutely.
And that was my conversation with Brad a little while ago, is just how can we amplify that and how can we start giving people the information that they need? That's a beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. I want to talk a little bit about, I want to talk about your cemetery, the things that you're doing. So in addition to the green burial, is there Is there other changes that you're exploring as it relates to alternative disposition?
Well, we are hearing from consumers as well about alkaline hydrolysis, which
so we're going to stop there because
yes.
we talk about alkaline hydrolysis.
Yes.
I think the vast majority of people have no idea what that means. So how would you talk about it? And without using the term water cremation, because I think that can be a little bit confusing for people too. So walk our listeners through that.
Absolutely. And I'm very articulate in my language to kind of paint that picture, because oftentimes we only pick up little snippets of it, and it really doesn't speak to the truth of it. And so because of the green burial movement, I prided myself on educating the other options, right? Because I mean, it's scary for us as well, because we're the ones that are going to have to implement it.
What do you think it makes it scary?
It's different. It's new.
So something new, yeah.
Yeah, and also, you know, there's the human side to it, you know, where you want the body to be treated with respect and dignity. And then there's the practical side of it.
And the process of it.
And the process of it, yes.
Yeah. Which is, maybe I'll interject to say a little bit about me, which is why I find burial, whether it be green burial or any kind of burial, lovely, because Mother Nature takes care of the process, right?
Exactly.
And so, but I think it's important to talk about the process if we're not having burial and we are looking at another form of reducing the body to its natural components.
Absolutely.
How, you know, I think people need to be informed of what that means, right? As opposed to euphemisms of even the word like cremation. So go ahead and talk about that.
We had brought Dean Fisher out, who was actually the instrumental in California with the cadavers for medical students. So they had to come up with a way to get the bodies looked after 4 years, because it became their responsibility.
Yeah.
And so he spoke to us about alkaline hydrolysis, water cremation, all the things that, you know, people call it. And at the end of the day, it is lots of water, it is high temperature, and it is chemical. And so we need to call it what it is. And that's why water cremation is an oxymoron. Cremate is to fire, is to flame. I think some people try to soften it up. And I know the softening. I know we don't call dirt, we call it soil. We tuck them in, we don't bury. So I understand that desire.
And softening is important.
For sure.
So long as it doesn't create confusion
and misrepresentation.
And I think, like, once people understand what's happening, their water cremation, sure, we can, you know, whatever words make sense, or
absolutely.
I have yet to come across a easy way to talk about alkaline hydrolysis, you know, in a way that is simple for people to understand.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's no way to soften it up in the reality tour, which I like to call it.
Yeah.
And it's the same with the natural organic reduction or human composting, right?
Yeah. Natural organic reduction,
I
think is such an interesting way to put that.
Again, trying to soften it, right?
Yeah.
But 99% of people, when they call me, they talk about human composting.
They talk about human composting, yeah.
And I learned a little bit as well when we did double depth in our cemetery. So we started to tuck two people into the same footprint that only one would.
So like one above the other?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
And it was the first time in our cemetery, so it was pretty scary.
And with a vault or without a vault?
Without a vault. So 7.5 feet, the first one.
So there's risk when you reopen, for sure.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I was under the assumption it would be partners or husband and wife or, you know, brother and sister, or however that looked like. And I had the sweetest little 80-year-old, and she did the math, and she said, you know, it's about $1,000 cheaper in the green burial double depth. Can I go in with a stranger? And we laughed about it because she had said, well, as long as he's a good looking man. And I said, oh, all of them dead are good looking. Come on now, Helga. So we giggled, and I had to pose that question to our legislature, because we'd never done it before.
What did you end up doing?
We ended up saying that Consumer Protection said, hey, as long as the consumer knows.
And there's full consent and understanding.
Absolutely.
So in that green burial section, is there markers or is there any?
No.
So that changes the territorialism that you had talked about originally. So do you find that goes away because there's no longer any markings that all of a sudden it's almost like the markers themselves create that territorialism.
Absolutely, because there lies their name. So with us, we have a serenity path that circles the area around, and it's magnificent. And we've so got it going on now by phase 4. And the families, though, in the beginning, it was a little scary for them, especially when I had young people. But I would let them know that the memorialization, which is a place to put their name, which is strategically placed near the burial, but it's common. So it's a great big slab of basalt, which is a very hardy stone, and it can hold up to 400 names.
So if you're buried in that section,
correct,
you can have is it an option? Are there people who are buried anonymously and that's their choice?
Absolutely. And we don't have a requirement for what goes on there. So they have a certain amount of characters and however they present it. Sometimes it's just a name and sometimes it's genealogy with their dates. And it's been beautiful. And we were able to have placeholders by people putting their name on there ahead of time to be able to reunite them, because couples couldn't pick side-by-side graves, but they used to tease. I had the cutest little couple that said, oh, we'll find each other underground. And so
you can't select or purchase.
No, because with the green, 6 months to a year after we've tucked them in and Mother Nature has done her thing, we plant ground cover or trees on top. So you can't bring equipment back in there. But we did open up. That's why we did our double depth.
Right.
But, I took a hit from some true green enthusiasts. They said, oh, Lorraine, the microbiomes don't work effectively at 7.5 feet. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, when or if somebody comes to me and wants to talk about microbiomes, I'll give them your number. I haven't had to give that number out. Everybody was just so thrilled that we could put 2 in the same footprint.
And it's so much about, so much of the innovation and the change that happens in funeral service generally, I think comes from, it always comes from what people want. It comes from society. It comes from people experiencing different things and saying, hey, that's something I want for myself, right? And I think that the defining nature of the death care profession in Canada, and I would say perhaps anywhere in the world, is that we respond to that. And we try within whatever rules we're having to find ourselves in, whatever legislation and wherever we are, we try to find a way to be able to help people do what it is that they want to do, because I think we all intrinsically understand, those of us that care for families during a time of loss, that is really the overriding thing that's important. Whether we agree with it, whether we would do it, whether someone else agrees with it, whether the biomes are there or not, it's about giving people that comfort.
Absolutely.
That's the most important thing.
Absolutely. And to watch how it's evolved and the healing for me, people saying thank you. The thought of cremating my son was so awful, but you had this beautiful option that we've watched him nurture this Gary oak tree that was so little when it was planted, and now we just every year we watch like Mother Nature, right? The leaves come off and come back on, and it's pretty cool actually. Pretty cool.
That is an amazing place, I think, to end our discussion, and I think I'm walking away from our discussion today feeling very inspired by the work that you're doing, and I just want to thank you for taking the time to share that with me and with all of the folks that are listening. And thank you so much for being part of our discussion here on Digging Deep. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So thank you so much to our listeners for joining us on this episode of Digging Deep. As we've discussed today, green burials offer more than environmentally friendly options. They reflect a shift in values, a return to simplicity, and a deep respect for the person whose life is being honored. And I think that is probably the most beautiful thing that we talked about today. If you found today's discussion valuable, please be sure to follow, leave a comment, and share Digging Deep with your colleagues or perhaps with someone in your life that you feel might find this discussion valuable. Your support helps us to continue to bring these important discussions to not just our profession, but to the community at large. Until next time, I'm Heather Kiteley. Keep digging deep.